Absolute power corrupts absolutely, a statement that has echoed through society's mind for over a century, and it has become more and more prevalent within the past decade. For peasant-born couple Elena and Nicolae Ceausescu, the allure of power was too much to resist, and they took full advantage of the money and prestige that came with being the head of state. They lived lavishly, while thousands of Romanian citizens suffered, struggled, and even died under their reign. This is part one of the story of Nicolae and Elena Ceausescu. I'm your host, Lauren Powers, and you are listening to Not Your History Class podcast. Our standard education has barely touched upon the depth, violence, and tragedy of human history. My intention with this podcast is to illuminate the parts of our history that have been in the dark for far too long. I want to take a comprehensive dive into our world and to give a different and new perspective on our past. Please note this podcast contains content and information that may not be suitable for children under the age of 13. Please be advised. Elena Petrescu, also known as Lența Petrescu, was born in 1916 in a town near Bucharest to a family of farmers and traders. Her father sold goods out of their home and was a plowman. Houses were built of mud. She dropped out of school at the age of 14, having failed the school's alternative curriculum of sewing. But there are other sources that state that she got kicked out of school for cheating. She moved with her brother, known as Blockhead, to Bucharest, the capital of Romania. She had a difficult time keeping jobs as she lacked the education and skills. Her brother found her work at a weaving factory through a friend of his. Vasile Dumitrescu, former Romanian ambassador to Switzerland, said of Elena, quote, "You could tell she came from the country. She was very much a farm girl. Anything you put on her looked terrible. In Romania, there is a saying that when clothes look like that on you, it's as if you put a saddle on a cow." End quote. Nicolae Ceausescu was born in the same year. He was born to peasant farmers in Scornesti, near Elena's hometown. He was the third of 10 children. His parents, as evidenced by lack of cultural engagement, ran out of apparent names to give their children and named one of their younger sons Nicolae as well. The elder son Nicolae left his village at the age of 11 and started to work as an apprentice for a shoemaker in Bucharest, in a working-class neighborhood. Elena and Nicolae met in the 1930s. They were both living in a Bucharest suburb called the Park of Joy. It was a working-class neighborhood and had a union stadium and factories. Nearby, there was a small, rather sordid pub with a dance floor. The local barflies, a group of boys, decided that they were going to elect a queen of the pub. To do this, they had individuals buy tickets, and the girl who had the most tickets won the queen title. Dumitrescu said, quote, "The more you bought, the more you loved the girl." End quote. Somehow, Nicolae was able to raise enough money to be able to get Elena elected queen of the pub. This little story became part of their legend. Whether or not this is true of Elena being elected queen of the pub, she became Miss Working Class of 1939, and thus the legend of the Ceausescus was born. In the official document written by the Department of Propaganda of the Romanian Communist Party, the pub later grew into the local stadium. The Saturday night dances transformed into a sort of workers' ball in honor of May Day, which is seen as a sacred day to those who followed the teachings of Marx, Engels, and Lenin. May Day is essentially Labor Day for those who live in the United States. It is considered a national holiday in Romania. Initially established in 1890, it was associated with the communist era and political propaganda. After the Romanian Revolution, it became toned down and was simply a day off work. During World War II, Romania fought on Germany's side. Nicolae spent that time in jail, the tale being that he stole a piece of luggage at a train station that had communist pamphlets inside. He was imprisoned in 1936 and again in 1940 for being an alleged communist. He was not very liked by his fellow inmates. He was also inmates with Pavel Câmpanu, a Romanian Marxist and sociologist. Câmpanu said of Ceausescu that he clearly disliked his fellow inmates, having contempt for them. Quote, "We took showers together. You see everything. I remember the shock when we went together in the shower. He was very ugly. Do you have the word disgracieux? Deformed." End quote. Elena and Nicolae became engaged while he was in prison. She helped build his confidence. It's not known exactly when they got married. In 1943, Nicolae was sent to the concentration camp Târgu. He formed relationships with leaders of the Communist Party, such as Georgiu Dej, who later became the first general secretary of the Communist Romania. Nicolae and other younger individuals were given lessons in communist philosophy. Many inmates worked outside of the camp. Nicolae served as a go-between between the party leaders in the camp and the hidden communist followers. In August 23, 1944, Russia overran Romania and Nicolae was released from the camp. With his connections, he was named Secretary General of the Union of the Communist Youth after the communists took over Romania. Vasile Dumitrescu recruited him to work for the Communist Party. Nicolae had a complex over his height, barely reaching 5'2". It is theorized that later in life, he hired and chose ministers and bodyguards for their short heights. He had a terrible stutter that he struggled to overcome. He later worked with a speech therapist, but it was Elena who was able to calm him down. Quote, "Sometimes he had difficulty speaking, and he looked down at her. She would look at him and smile. She had a formidable influence on him," end quote, said Dumitrescu. During Georgiu Dej's reign, Nicolae held the second highest position. In 1965, after the death of Georgiu Dej, Nicolae became the leader of the PCR, also known as Romanian Communist Party, and then rose to president of the State Council in 1967. He created a national council for scientific research that had about 80 or 90 members. He also had his wife in the council as well, and within 2 years, she had earned her PhD in industrial chemistry. Elena could barely read or write, so it's highly unlikely that she actually did the coursework, which meant that someone had written her dissertation for her. It was either a joint effort of several scientists at the Central Chemical Institute, which she was director of, or it was a specific chemist at the institute who helped her not only potentially write her thesis, but also helped eventually write 2 books and 13 articles on synthesis and the characterization of macromolecular compounds, and 10 patents, all which add her name, Elena Ceausescu. Years prior, in 1957, a decree had been passed into law that liberated abortion. The birth rate decreased from 1958 to 1966 as a consequence of that law, or that was what was believed. There was a lot of traditional values at that time. Even if women worked 8 hours outside of the house, they were still expected to keep up with household chores. And with women entering the workforce, there were not as many children being born, and because of that, Romania saw a fall in population. In order to change that, the Ceausescus drafted a radical law in 1966 that banned abortions, with the idea of helping to raise the birth rate. The response to the dropping birth rate was extreme, to say the least. The abortion law in Romania that passed in the 1960s was called Decree 770. Not only did it ban abortion, but it banned contraception. This majorly violated a woman's rights to her body and how many children, if any, she wanted. The decree stated that it was a woman's patriotic duty to give the country children. The Securitate The secret police was established in maternity hospitals to control gynecologists and nurses. Women were forced to attend a gynecological exam every month. Any pregnancy that was detected was followed through to the end. Women under the age of 45 were expected to have at least 5 children. If a woman were to receive an abortion or a doctor to give one, they would end up spending time in prison. Persons over the age of 25 who did not have children, unless they had a valid medical reason, were punished for being celibate by having to pay 30% tax on income. There were a few extenuating circumstances where a woman could receive legal abortion. That was if the woman's life was in danger due to the pregnancy, if the woman was sexually assaulted, or if the woman had a chronic disease that could endanger the child's life. There was very little sex education in Romania, and therefore there was a lack of information on how to avoid pregnancy. The number of babies doubled the next year, 93% more than the previous year. Due to this incredibly restrictive law, illegal abortion clinics started to pop up that provided women with abortions, but these clinics were rudimentary and could be dangerous. Women could bleed out, get an infection, or potentially die. This affected women, mostly lower income or poverty-ridden women. Wealthy women could pay for black market contraception or an abortion at a specialized clinic. Due to this, the birth rate once again declined in the 70s. The rate of maternal mortality skyrocketed, reaching the highest in Europe, leaving behind many orphan children. Old medical practices that had been abandoned in the West half a century prior were being used in Romania. Babies were given blood transfusions to help stimulate growth. Some of the blood was infected with HIV. Doctors who figured out what was happening were frightened into silence by the Ministry of Health. 10,000 women died due to this law, and over 100,000 of children grew up in orphanages. Mortality rate with the babies was so high that their birth was not recorded until they'd been alive for 4 weeks. Between 1967 and 1989, about 10 million children were born, and 340,000 died before the age of 1. 20% of children were born either underweight or had congenital malformations. Many children were abandoned, unwanted, or grew up in unstable home environments. Social programs were insufficient for how many children were born. Classrooms were overcrowded, and the quality of education decreased. In 1969, Nicolae Ceausescu removed Romania from its participation in the Warsaw Pact military alliance, which was a defense treaty created by the Soviet Union and 7 other countries, including Albania, Bulgaria, Hungary, East Germany, Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Romania. Ceausescu had a more independent policy when it came to foreign relations. He refused to use liberal reforms. Free speech was still firmly in control of the secret police, as well as the media. Romania had a massive amount of debt due to accelerated industrialization. Within the 70s, Ceausescu ordered majority of the agricultural and industrial product to be exported. This left Romanian citizens fighting to survive. There was a food and medicine shortage. In 1972, Nicolae established a program of systemization to build the country into a more socialized style. About 1/15 of historical buildings and churches were demolished in Bucharest and rebuilt. Ceausescu went on to establish family members in high government jobs, including his wife. One of her first jobs was at the Ministry of Foreign Relations in the basement. She had to organize and clip foreign newspapers. Nicolae's old cellmate, Pavel Campanau, who worked at the ministry at the same time, said, quote, "It was a big problem because she couldn't distinguish between them. She mixed the French with the English." End quote. One day, she didn't show up, which wasn't noticed. Quote, "She was not useful for anything." End quote, said Campanau. Nicolae sent Elena to the Polytechnical Institute years later, where she was found cheating on a test on Marxism. When she was warned that that wasn't allowed, she was given a second warning and she didn't listen. She was expelled from the test. Elena was a social/political climber. She would frequently call the daughter of the general secretary of the Communist Party, in which the daughter described Elena as, quote, absolutely unbearable, end quote. Their regular motorcade routes had food lines, and the sight of starving Romanians standing in line was so offensive to the Ceausescus that these food markets would disappear overnight, replaced with something innocuous, like a bicycle shop. There's also the story of Nikolai's father going to his favorite pub in Dorobancy Square and telling his drinking buddies, quote, don't believe what my son says. He tells nothing but lies, end quote. The next day, the pub had been replaced with a dairy shop. Without a doubt, living in Romania was difficult. 2 pounds of coffee, which was actually made from chickpeas, would cost half a month's salary. A 40-watt bulb would light an entire room. Typewriters had to be registered with the police. If you spoke to a foreigner, the conversation had to be reported within 24 hours. About 1 in 4 citizens worked with or were either forced to work with the Securitate. Sometimes late-night interrogations of citizens would result in a death from a heart attack. Being in the upper echelon of the Romanian Communist Party had its advantages, such as having live-in maids that were supplied by the party, and the finest foods delivered to their door at the lowest prices. Cars, chauffeurs would also be provided for. They lived in the lap of luxury, while people were literally starving in the streets. What Elena lacked in the intellectual department, she made up for in her lavish clothing. She had over 2,000 gowns, and when Elena died, she had about 40 fur coats. Her husband, strangely enough, would burn clothing and shoes after wearing them once so that no one could ever potentially wear them. In the Museum of History in Bucharest, there was an entire wing dedicated to them, including mannequins with outfits that they wore during their reign. The displays have been taken down since then. There is also over 100 honors that they received during their quarter century in power. During get-togethers of the Communist Party, when Elena and her husband arrived, other women would need to leave. They weren't allowed to wear the same fabric or have the same model of clothing as Elena did. Pretty young women were not allowed near her, and it was seen as a big faux pas if someone complimented another woman in front of her. One of the women who dressed her said, quote, every time I went there, I gulped down a fistful of medicines, end quote. The Ceausescus had about 40 homes, 1 in each Romanian province. Nikolai liked to hunt bears despite being a poor shot, and so they also owned hunting lodges. The bears would be gathered by beaters in one spot so that Nikolai could kill them off. It was difficult being an employee of theirs. One of the workers said that when she had to pull back the oriental rug to clean the floor, that she, quote, would feel her shadow behind you, standing there to see if you were actually wiping the floor, end quote. The workers weren't allowed in the house until the couple woke up, and they were expected to clean without a break except for lunch from 7 a.m. to when the family went to sleep. The workers were treated like animals, with Elena often calling them stupid, animal, or idiot. The food was locked up, and the chef would have to prepare individual dishes for members of the family. The meals that the servants ate were sent from the party kitchen, and any leftovers that the Ceausescus had were sent back so that they would not get charged for the meal. Same with flowers. Each day there was fresh flowers in their home, but they would be returned to the greenhouse so that they could be sold again. Starvation was the biggest issue for citizens and their servants. Nikolai had exported so much product that was grown by Romania that people were in a semi-starved state. Forced collectivization and industrialization robbed people of their farms. Villages and cottages were destroyed, and people were moved into ugly 5- and 6-story cement buildings with outhouses. To justify the starved state that the Romanian people were in, the Ceausescus created a system called Rational Nourishment Commission that decreed that certain populations were overeating for their jobs. This mandated the amount of calories that they required. Meat, milk, Oranges, bananas, fresh food essentially was rarely available. People had to wait in long lines in the cold to perhaps get a few blackened apples, and those who worked couldn't get in line to get food. On the other side, for Elena's last birthday, she had 3 different types of large grain caviar, foie gras, 15 kinds of meat such as filet mignon, roast beef, pork chops, venison, etc. Later, it was found out that their daughter Zoya would feed her dogs imported veal that she weighed on a golden scale. The Ceausescus had 3 children. Valentin, the oldest, worked at the Central Committee and later ended up in jail. Zoya was the middle child. She fell in love with the doctor, but Elena didn't want her daughter to be with the doctor as he wasn't political. They attempted to elope in Hungary, but it didn't end up happening. Later, the doctor's father was fired from his teaching position at the University of Cluj. Nicu was the youngest and the favorite of Elena and Nicolae. Elena had complete control over her children. She would have them followed. There were microphones installed in their bedrooms. Nicu's guards said to his friend Radu Ionid, a Romanian Holocaust historian, that, quote, "Every 2 hours we have to tell the lady what he is doing. Every 2 hours. What he is eating, what he is drinking, who he is fucking," end quote. Since their first 2 children were an embarrassment to them, Valentin having married a half-Jewish woman that they didn't approve of, and Zoya with her young doctor, Nicu was fawned over by his parents. He was very bright, had a great memory like his dad, and was designated their heir apparent. But that coddling didn't do much for Nicu, because at the age of 30, he was allegedly still sucking his thumb. He refused to take responsibility for his actions, and at one point it was wondered that he may be a sadomasochist. Radu said that he, quote, "wanted either to hurt or be hurt," end quote. He was angry, promiscuous, and a mama's boy. The one serious relationship he had in his life had been stopped by his mom because the girl was partially Jewish. She was even forcibly given an abortion by order of Elena after falling pregnant by Nicu. Nicu blamed his mother for his over-the-top drinking and even apparently let a member of the Securitate take the blame for him running over a pedestrian, yet his friends apparently stayed loyal. This is the end of part 1 about Nicolae and Elena Ceausescu. In part 2, I will be discussing the downfall of this tyrannical couple and the hopeful future of Romania. If you are looking for sources for this episode, please check out the show notes. Transcripts and sources will also be on my website, notyourhistoryclasspodcast.com. Hosting, production, and editing is done by Lauren Powers. Theme song is done by Mike Meyers. You can find him on the Mike Show 42 on X. If you have any recommendations or suggestions for a future episode, you can direct message me via social media or email me at notyourhistoryclass@gmail.com. It's December 1989, and the people of Romania are protesting the eviction of Reverend Laszlo Tokes, the unexpected hero of the Romanian Revolution. Romania's secret police, the Securitate, were there to take Tokes away from his home, to evict him, and make sure that his words would never again reach the ears of the Romanian people. But the people would not have it, and the citizens of Romania refused to back down. They started to yell and sing, "Liberty, liberty, down with Ceausescu." Little did they know, it would only be merely days before their prayers were answered, and the Ceausescus stood in front of a judge pleading for mercy and their innocence against their tyrannical crimes against humanity. This is part 2 of Nicolae and Elena Ceausescu. I highly suggest going back and listening to the first part before getting into this one. I'm your host, Lauren Powers, and you are listening to Not Your History Class Podcast. Our standard education has barely touched upon the depth, violence, and tragedy of human history. My intention with this podcast is to illuminate the parts of our history that have been in the dark for far too long. I want to take a comprehensive dive into our world and to give a different and new perspective on our past. Please note this podcast contains content and information that may not be suitable for children under the age of 13. Please be advised. Perhaps the thing that kept communist Romania afloat during the 70s and 80s was the sensitivity that Romanians had towards foreign domination. Ceausescu had refused to send troops to quell the rebellion in Czechoslovakia during the 1960s, which spoke to the masses, as they had a leader that would refuse to bow down to Russia overrunning their country once again. The event that likely started the Ceausescu's hold on Romania was when they went to China in the 1970s and saw how China treated Mao. Henry Kissinger, United States Secretary of State in the 70s, said, quote, "In those days, China was less dry and bureaucratic than Russia. If you were in China, you'd have seen a nation totally focused on one leader. There was an extraordinary impression not only of monolithic power and the authority to enforce your will, but also a sense of reverence in the presence of Mao. People wanted to do what Mao wanted them to do. He was a quasi-religious figure. I can see how a peasant boy and girl would be attracted." End quote. In order to create this almost legendary-like leader in Romania, the Ceausescus had their words enshrined, legends created. They used Mao's little red book to inspire Nicolai's speeches. People were taken out of work, children out of school, to have these spontaneous displays of love for Nicolai and Elena, all of them in a stadium chanting their love. Elena stated that her husband belonged in the pantheon of the greats and he deserved to be worshipped. Nicolai had no problem believing this propaganda, and he eventually became what could be described as a megalomaniac. A megalomaniac is someone who has highly inflated sense of their powers, capabilities, and importance. My favorite example of this is Gilderoy Lockhart from the Harry Potter series. The trip to China was formative for Elena too. While she initially had very little interest in politics, after seeing the way that Mao was worshipped, she began to insert herself into Romanian politics. She became a member of the Communist Party Central Committee, and then in 1973 graduated to the Executive Committee. By 1980, she became the first deputy prime minister in the Council of Ministers, which is the second place right after her husband. The honorary credentials she lacked were given complementary titles. In 1982, on International Women's Day, she was extolled as, quote, comrade, accommodation, doctor, engineer. Elena Ceausescu, outstanding activist of party and state, eminent personage of Romanian and international science. End quote. No one could get to the president without her approval, and his workers were afraid to tell him the truth. New York Rabbi Arthur Schneider, who had previously spoken before to Nicolai about human rights and religious freedom, said that, quote, his ministers and diplomats would tell him nothing, end quote. My personal education has roots in behavioral science, and sometimes I like to get into the psychology of why people do what they do. According to an article written by Dr. Ronald Riggio in Psychology Today, that despite the quote, absolute power corrupts absolutely, that power is not going to inherently lead to corruption. Instead, what leads to corruption is the motivation behind gaining power. Powerful people quite simply have better privileges. They can buy themselves out of trouble. They also have the possibility of being able to intimidate those with less power. They can also start to believe that rules and laws don't apply to them. It's easy for them to lose focus and lose the ability to see from others' perspective, which can lead to an exploitation of people who work for them or who they are in charge of. The best remedy for this is humility, for others to point out their mistakes and missteps. With Nicolai's workers too afraid to even tell him the truth, his and Elena's power went virtually unchecked. Elena also managed to use sexual blackmail against members of the nomenklatura, influential members of government. She would have microphones hidden in their hotel rooms and in restaurants. There were some theories that the reason for this intrusion of privacy was that this was her type of pornography. She enjoyed being the voyeur. Others surmise that it was the power that she enjoyed more than the sex. Information she gathered was used to create Nikolai's distrust of his associates, causing him to later replace around 40 members of the government with members of his and her families. As with the feeling of self-importance, megalomania also comes with a healthy side of paranoia. Nikolai was paranoid towards the end of his reign that he was either going to be contaminated or poisoned. There's even a story from the former chief of intelligence, Ion Pachipa, that Fidel Castro once told Nikolai that there was a plot by the CIA to rub the inside of his shoes with a substance that would cause his hair to fall out. Nikolai insisted that his clothes be kept in sealed bags and checked for contamination before being worn. Flowers or gifts given to him were also checked for contamination and sprayed with disinfectant before he received them. They had a taste tester to make sure their food wasn't poisoned before they ate it, and they traveled with their own trusted chef. Elena had complete control over the artistic, cultural, and educational life of Romania for nearly 2 decades. Mircea Racuna, a former member of the foreign ministry, had called Elena's control a, quote, cultural genocide, end quote. She objected to what she didn't understand. In 1989, the president of the Romanian Academy suggested doing something to mark the bicentennial of the French Revolution. She thought he was talking about a revolution taking place in the world at the moment. Quote, "Why should we help Mitterrand with his revolution? We don't want his revolution around here." End quote. Even when it was explained to her that this was a historical event that happened 2 centuries ago, she said, quote, "It's an old one. We don't need it." End quote. She had a similar reaction when the president of the Academy of Political and Social Sciences, Mina Gorgu, suggested that she promote social sciences as well as political. He suggested philosophy. She said, quote, "What social sciences? Philosophy? We don't need that at all. You have the speeches of the comrade. That's all the philosophy you need." End quote. Libraries and bookstores could no longer have foreign periodicals or books, but they had to display all 30 volumes of Nicolae Ceausescu's wit and wisdom in his speeches, and the scientific work that his wife most certainly didn't do, but was credited to her anyway. As I researched these individuals, a Shakespearean quote from Macbeth echoed in my head that I feel fits Elena perfectly. Quote, "It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing." End quote. One such building that showed Elena's determination to wipe any sort of historical or cultural significance of Romania's history off the map was the House of the Republic, an enormous, ugly building that started in 1984 as the new headquarters for the Central Committee of the Communist Party. It had 1,000 rooms above ground, 3 levels of tunnels, bunkers, atomic shelters. It cost the nation $1 billion. It was designed to host 1,500 communist elite families. Part of Bucharest was razed to complete this building. 50,000 people lost their homes. Historical churches, monuments, a synagogue, and an ancient monastery on a hill, including the hill itself, were all destroyed to make way for this monstrosity. Architect Mariana Shellac described it as, quote, "a cancer developing in the center of town. You will find a balcony in every project of this sort, the leader on the balcony and the people down below." End quote. Comparing it to the type of building that Hitler or Stalin might commission to be built. There's also a platform complete with hydraulic elevators that would bring Ceausescu above the head of the people of Romania, as if to appear from nowhere so he may address the crowds. Elena was eventually the downfall of the Ceausescus. Her vindictive nature and her tone-deaf politics caused her to convince Nikolai to return home after his trip to Iran in December of 1989. He should have never left Romania if he wanted to survive as its dictator, and with revolution brewing on the horizon, he should have never returned home. The events that started the Romanian Revolution originated in Timișoara with the attempted eviction of Reverend Laszlo Tokes. Quote, in 1989, Laszlo Tokes risked his life to challenge the power of Ceausescu, one of the most infamous communist dictators in Europe. Despite being unarmed and inexperienced in this confrontation, he possessed two superior weapons, an abiding faith in God and the moral conviction that by resisting tyranny, he could make it fall, end quote, said Edith Laver, board member of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. With Tokes' eviction on the horizon, Timișoara erupted in a violent clash. Quote, I did not want to become a revolutionary, but step by step my attitude was radicalized because we had to speak out. He was a Stalinist-type dictator. The Romanian system became more and more cruel. We were under total control by the Securitate, the Romanian Secret Service. Romanian economical life was disastrous, misery and poverty. The church became a center of peaceful opposition. I did not make politics in the church. I only tried to express that we must obey God rather than men. People began to gather around my church. When looking out through the windows, my windows at the large crowd, sincerely, I was frightened of the probable consequences of their brave demonstration. I remember the people began to sing patriotic songs, to shout against the regime, liberty, liberty, down with Ceausescu. The army was very cruel, very violent. About 50 people were killed in a day. That was the bloodiest day in Timișoara. In a very short time, the demonstrations enlarged into neighboring cities, end quote, said Tokes. The militia and military got involved using tear gas and water jets to subdue protesters, and the army used tanks and opened fire. State of emergency was called by Nicolae Ceausescu. On December 22nd, he ordered General Vasile Milea, Minister of National Defense, to shoot demonstrators. Milea refused and committed suicide. Army and militia also refused to shoot protesters. A little after noon, the Ceausescus fled the Central Committee building by escaping on a helicopter, an aide allegedly holding a gun to the pilot's head. Despite the terrifying situation that the pilot was put in, he managed to pretend that he was having engine failure, and the Ceausescus were stopped by armed forces at a roadblock. Elena and Nicolae Ceausescu were taken in by the Securitate in Târgoviște. The revolutionaries were starting to take over the building and considered this a victory for the rebellion. Army was then ordered to support the revolution, preventing further violence. The National Salvation Front Council was formed, which would guide Romania after the revolution and organize free elections. Structures of Ceausescu's old regime were dismantled. At 11 p.m. that day, an announcement was made from the National Salvation Front Council, also known as CFSN, to Romania, the document requesting the following: institute democracy, dissolve institutions of Ceausescu's regime, and local branches established to provide local government. The CFSN was originally formed to oppose Ceausescu and lead Romania to democracy. On December 24th, CFSN decided to try Elena and Nicolae Ceausescu. The trial lasted less than an hour, had no evidence, and Ceausescu called it a conspiracy, refusing to speak unless in front of the National Assembly. The next day, December 25th, 1989, in Târgoviște, they were accused of 64,000 deaths during their regime by the Exceptional Military Court, a specialized atonal court. Chief Military Judge Gica Popa had delivered the verdict of guilty after a couple moments of deliberation and ordered an immediate execution. Nicolae shouted, quote, "I have the right to do what I want," end quote. Elena yelled, quote, "Don't tie us up, don't offend us," end quote. They were lined up against the wall and shot before the camera could even be turned on. After their death, one soldier was asked to step forward and shoot the wall so that it could be recorded, and that is the footage that was shown around the world. Nicolae's final request was that he wanted to die by his wife's side. He shouted, quote, "Long live the free and independent Romanian Socialist Republic." They died by each other's side on December 25th, 1989. Their bodies were put into nameless graves, although later their names were added, the two graves separated by a footpath. Petre Roman was then appointed prime minister in the interim by the CFSN. Of Romania before the revolution, Traian Rabeghia, a 19-year-old geology student at the time, had said, quote, "It was war. It was a war zone here. I was shouting, 'Liberty! We are the people, and down with Ceausescu.' I remember the poverty of the 80s. I remember in Bucharest, the breweries, restaurants, everything was dark. We knew that people living in other countries had more material wealth and were living better. It was clear to me that something would happen, but nobody was really talking about it." End quote. There was a lack of food, heating, and lighting for the citizens, while the Ceausescus lived in luxury. As many as 1 in 4 people was thought to be working for the Securitate, and the Securitate was also responsible for killing and torturing thousands of dissenters. Ioan Ălescu took over the execution of the Ceausescus. Things didn't get better right away. In fact, he and former Prime Minister Petre Roman and former Deputy Prime Minister Gilu Vocan Velescu was accused of spreading disinformation via TV appearances and making statements. After Ălescu took over, some sources say 1,100 people were killed in a violent revolt. Firearms were distributed to the population, and due to that, there were numerous shootouts between December 22nd and December 25th. Ălescu was indicted in crimes against humanity in 2019. Although I could not find any information as to whether or not he had been prosecuted, it was likely that the judge threw out the case. Prosecutors in his trial said that his statements increased, quote, "instances of friendly fire, chaotic shooting, and contradictory military orders," end quote. As for Elena and her many accolades, her work was still being cited, and in 2021, Romanian researchers led by Chris Ozai, a psychological and neuroscience researcher in London, and Andrei Dumbrava, a senior lecturer and doctor at Alexandru Ioan Cuza University in Iași, called to have her name stripped from almost 24 scientific papers and books. They also want her honorary titles, awards, and her PhD to be revoked. She was barely literate in science and couldn't even recognize formulas given to first-year chemistry students. Elena's biographer, Lavinia Beatty, a professor and historian at the University of Arad, said, quote, "The Ceausescus never needed money again after Nicolae Ceausescu was appointed General Secretary of the Communist Party in 1965. All their expenses for food, clothes, and leisure were taken care of. However, the constitutions of communist countries stipulated that citizens had both a right and an obligation to work. As the wife of the most powerful politician in the country, Elena Ceausescu wanted to portray herself as a role model, worthy of being next to the great political leader, her husband. She wouldn't hear of having just any job. As communism prized science as a force for industrial production, and being an intellectual had also been valued when she had been younger, a job as a scientist would work well with being the first female comrade of the country." End quote. Elena ended up specializing in polymer research in her academic publications. Dumbrava said, quote, "It was just a matter of chance before she got her PhD, before she got her Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry. She was an unskilled worker in the institute under the supervision of the person who had most worked on her PhD." End quote. Edward Baer, author of Kiss the Hand You Cannot Bite, The Rise and Fall of the Ceausescus, said that when he spoke to Mircea Corchove, a scientist at National Institute for Research and Development in Chemistry and Petrochemistry, recalled that, quote, In her new position, it was very difficult to talk to her. She gave orders, she wanted no arguments. It was impossible for him to discover the extent of her knowledge of chemistry, for she never discussed the scientific aspects of the Institute's work, concerning herself only with political and administrative matters. Korchove discovered that she didn't know what a chromatograph was, and didn't recognize the formula for sulfuric acid taught to first-year chemistry students." End quote. On the day that Elena was going to defend her chemistry doctorate, Korchove went to attend, as by law and university tradition, all events are open to the public. But when they got there, the doors were locked and the session had already happened in camera. While Elena had the full resources of Romania behind her, her reputation couldn't have reached internationally without the West publishing her work. Quote, "Her international fame was supported by forcing Romanian chemists to write papers, some of which were published in international journals, as well as a book that was translated in English and published by Pergamon Press, a widely known British academic publisher," said Ceausescus. She would demand that universities in places such as Washington and New York award her honorary titles. She wanted to have this recognition and respect and be essentially showered with gifts from different countries around the world due to her prestigious status. Dumbrava called it, quote, "a childish desire," end quote. The biography BT said that, quote, "her first recognitions came from France and the United States before entering the Romanian Academy. Can you excuse the interest of those who did not live in a communist dictatorship and blame only those in the country, or just her? That's not fair, in my opinion. Obviously, everyone knew she was an imposter. Those who gave her titles or pressured others to do so are guilty of having contributed to an intellectual imposture of colossal proportions. Those who took part in the deception were not penalized. Without them, those like Elena Ceausescu would not have existed as a world-renowned scientist." End quote. Mircea Tordescu from the Polytechnic University of Bucharest Department of Bioresources and Polymer Science was one of the scientists who co-authored papers with Elena between 1984 and 1989. In 2021, he was one of the people trying to have her name retracted from scientific works. Quote, "The whole scientific output of this department had to have Elena Ceausescu as the first author. Because of the orders of the Communist Party, this included all joint projects with researchers from other institutions like me and other colleagues of mine. I knew from the very beginning that all papers resulted from these joint projects would have Elena Ceausescu as the first author, but I accepted the situation due to the location of the laboratory and also because the projects I participated in involved high-quality scientific research, which offered me the opportunity to learn a lot and gain research expertise. In fact, I believe that she did not even read those works because I very much doubt she had the ability to understand them. I consider that it is a moral issue to correct this." End quote. After Elena's death, a school teacher came forward with one of Elena's report cards, showing that Elena had failed nearly all subjects taught in Romanian schools in the early 20th century. Ceausescus said that, quote, "In Romania academia, plagiarism is rampant, as is nepotism. Sloppy science is ubiquitous. Much of it is a consequence of Elena Ceausescu's nefarious and outsized influence in the 70s and 80s. End quote. As for the Ceausescu children, Zoya, Valentin, and Nicu, they were detained after the Romanian Revolution and investigated for undermining the national economy. Zoya was questioned again later on, but her charges were cleared in 1996. She passed on in 2006 of lung cancer. Valentin was arrested on December 25th and held in prison for 8 months and then released. According to an article in the Irish Times from 2009, Valentin is living in Romania, keeping away from the public eye and working at an Institute of Atomic Physics. And Nicu? the heir apparent and favorite of the couple, the hard-drinking, hard-gambling son, was sentenced to 20 years in prison after the Romanian Revolution, but he was released in November 1992 due to his poor health. He passed away in September 1996 from liver cirrhosis and viral inflammation of the liver, per the statement from the Vienna General Hospital. Romanians now have such a deep repulsion to the Ceausescus that they can't even bear to say their names. Elena and Nicolae are referred to as the scientist and the shoemaker. If you are looking for sources for this episode, please check out the show notes. Transcripts and sources will also be on my website, notyourhistoryclasspodcast.com. Hosting, production, and editing is done by Lauren Powers. Theme song is done by Mike Meyers. You can find him on The Mike Show 42 on X. If you have any recommendations or suggestions for a future episode, you can direct message me via social media or email me at notyourhistoryclass@gmail.com.